I can't do that. Oh, there. Okay. I was gonna say hi to Charles back. He may not hear me because my mic can't see him. Otherwise we'll have.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
Interesting.
All right.
I'm getting off when it's out there.
One sec. How do I highlight myself?
Don't you pen yourself? Is it not building?
What? How does it do?
Pen yourself?
Yeah, how do I pin myself?
You click on it.
Okay.
What are the options?
Okay, I think you need to switch off mine because it keeps. There we go. Oh,
My microphone is off and my speaker's off.
There it is.
okay. We ready? Hey, Jose, we got some people online as well, so I'm going to go straight into it. You guys are all welcome to get something to drink, a tea, coffee, seltzer, water. Oh, you bought water.
Can you send something to us?
I can send you a virtual hug.
You should have had somebody deliver it.
I can hear my echo.
I was going to sit by. I thought you were planning for you to go here.
Oh, it's not you. Hold on. Hold on. How do I?
Sure.
How do I?
Is your phone?
How are you, honey?
Is your phone muted? Muted? Volume on?
Rabbi,
No, it's the YouTube.
you want some stuff?
I'm good, thank you.
What's this?
Hello, I'm Banner.
Jose. Oh, yeah.
How do I? Daniel, come here for a second. How do I make the volume of this so I don't hear it?
On YouTube?
Yeah.
You gotta turn it off.
No, it's the Facebook is going, but the Zoom.
Should be.
So,
I think the caption. Oh, this is Zoom. Yeah, this is Zoom. That's YouTube?
I like that. Well, that's.
Oh, it is YouTube, but there's no.
Yeah.
All right, I can't do it. I don't know how. Okay.
Rabbi, are you going to the IDF practical training or you've been?
I might go. It depends on the day. Yeah, you should come, Jose.
It's difficult to convince me.
Okay, welcome everybody. Being that we have people online, we'll go straight to it, and then we can take questions and discussion after. I'm so happy everyone made it tonight. So maybe afterwards we'll have a more of an informal discussion after. Okay. So today is Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. We entered a new month, a Jewish month called Tammuz, and 32 years ago, 1994, on the third day of Tammuz, which will be this coming Wednesday, because in the Jewish calendar, the day starts at night. So it will be Wednesday night, Thursday, is the day of the passing. It's the anniversary of the passing of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The 32 years since his passing. And obviously, being that we are a Chabad house, and we are very much a reason, the reason for us being is from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. We're here to spread the message of what and teachings of the Rebbe.
Just for him, would you say that he founded the Chabad movement in United
Well, he didn't,
States.
in not, the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe is, number 7 in, the founder of the Chabad movement, was the first Chabad Rebbe in the 1700s.
In the United States.
And the previous, and he is number 7 from the first founder of the Chabad movement. And his father-in-law, who was in Russia, and that's a whole another story, who escaped right before the Holocaust, or escaped during the Holocaust to America, founded Chabad here in America when he came in 1942. And then his father-in-law. And then the Rebbe came in 1944 or maybe 1943, and the previous Chabad Rebbe, the sixth Chabad Rebbe, passed away in 1950. And then in 1951, our Rebbe, who became the 7th Rebbe in line, took over the movement, the leader in 1951 in America, sent people all around the world to spread the message of Judaism, and passed away in 1994. And it's hard to believe that it's already been 32 years since that fateful day. And it's incredible as well to see how much growth there has been in Chabad. And there's without a doubt, yes, so much has changed, but nothing really has changed, because his leadership and the guidance and his teachings are still not only continuing, but are exponentially growing. And what's incredible even is that you see in young men and women who never even met the Rebbe, because he passed away 32 years ago, who are dedicating their lives to go on the Rebbe's message without even have met the Rebbe, because they were born after his passing, and going to far-flung places. I know someone from Los Angeles here that went to set up a Chabad house somewhere in Alaska, where it only gets about 3-4 hours sunlight a day. And it's all question about when they bring in Shabbat or not Shabbat. And he's a young man correct. And correct. I was privileged to have met the Rebbe, but I was 9 years old when the Rebbe passed away. Correct. So the way I would put it is, imagine being able to have lived in the times and to have experienced the times of Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, and to be under his guidance. Because without a doubt, the Rebbe was the leader of our generation. And if there was any worthy individual to have led the Jewish people and lead the Jewish people, it's without a doubt the Rebbe. The Rebbe was a leader of our generation, as we see, and how much he, after the Holocaust, and I would say, and I've said this many times, that post-Holocaust, the greatest gift that God gave the Jewish people was the state of Israel, as well as the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And to say that,
Where you're going.
okay, we will discuss it all. We're going to, and to imagine, going back to what I said, imagine living in the times of Moses, of Moshe Rabbeinu, we are living in those times, experiencing the Rebbe's leadership and power, and how much of his teachings and his message is impacting. You can get a taste of what it meant to be under and influenced by Moses himself. And that's what I want to do tonight. I want to share with you stories of the Rebbe and his impact over the world, because I don't know, even amongst righteous people and even amongst Jewish leaders through generations, someone who worked so diligently and so thoroughly, and someone that never rested. And when I mean never rested, you know what they say. What's the difference between ignorance and apathy? Anyone know? Charles, what's the difference between ignorance and apathy?
I defer to you.
The difference between ignorance and apathy is I don't know and I don't care. America being the first world country, which kind of everything influences from there. I would say from 1950 on, became a generation, especially amongst the Jewish people, when things were, it was the first time in many, many generations that Jews were able to live with freedom and not under persecution and not threatened for what? Very much became a generation of apathy. And I believe the Rebbe fought that. I think that's without many lead. Like, for example, his father-in-law was fighting against the communist Russia to keep Judaism alive. I think the Rebbe saw the enemy that he needed to fight was the enemy of apathy. Because if you look at the Rebbe's leadership, from the moment he took on leadership of Chabad in 1951, the Rebbe never missed a day, never took a vacation, never took a sick day. He, not one day, he would meet the schedule of a man, and we're not talking about a young man, a man that in his, up until his stroke in 1976, he would meet people at night because that was the only time that he had. And he would meet individuals, and at times it would go to 5 o'clock in the morning. And the next day he was back in the office and Shachrit and that, like it never was. He never took a holiday, never took a vacation. He worked, if I could say, an individual who worked 24/7, 365 days a week, it was the Rebbe. And this went on from 1951 to 94. He literally was there to whoever seeked him out, to the public, to government officials, to the Israeli prime ministers, to Israeli officials, and most importantly, as we see from Moshe Rabbeinu, what made him the leader he was, and what Hashem chose him as the leader to be the Jewish people is the character that he had of being a shepherd. And when this in the famous midrash, it says that he went when one sheep would leave the flock, he would run to get that sheep to bring him back. And that definitely was the character of the Rebbe, that each individual, no matter their status in life, was unique and was precious to the Rebbe. Didn't matter their age, didn't matter their affiliation. And he was constantly giving blessings, giving guidance. I mean, I can't even imagine what it would be like today when you have such easier, effective communication like email and things like that. But the Rebbe would communicate even before the faxes and telegrams, etc., etc. There was, besides for the President of the United States, there every single day, the mailman would come and deliver, those big, huge bags, two of those bags of letters for the Rebbe. Now, the president has people and staff, and many staff opening those letters and going through them, etc. The Rebbe would not allow any of his staff to open it unless he opened it first. So the Rebbe would constantly go through each and every single person. There was a time, I'll tell you a story about the care that the Rebbe looked into each one of these questions that people and guidance that people were asking him. There was a chassid that saw the time it consumed for the Rebbe of open each and every letter. So he heard that there's a machine that can come and open an envelope. So he thought he'll buy, it was a very expensive machine at the time. He'll buy the machine for the Rebbe, right? And this way it will save the Rebbe a lot of time. He doesn't have to go through each envelope. He can just read the letters. So he went to speak to the secretaries. The secretary said it's not a good idea. So he says, come on, it has to be. So he was convinced. He bought the machine with that, and he put it in the Rebbe. They put it in the Rebbe's office. A week later, the Rebbe didn't touch it. So he came and he says, what's the problem? So the Rebbe said, it's too much, makes too much noise. Thanks. So he went and he did research, and he needed to find a machine that doesn't make the noise and this and that. He finally found a machine that made no noise and this and that, and he went and got that machine. Again, the Rebbe's not using it. Finally, I can't remember how, but finally they asked the Rebbe, why is he not using the machine? And the Rebbe turned to the secretaries and he says, how can I leave it to machine when these envelopes, some of them are sealed with the tears of the people? How can I leave that to a machine? So we see how sensitive the Rebbe was as well to each and every one of these. And the Rebbe, again, where did he find the time? Do you know when he had his stroke, the first heart attack, the Dr. Weiss wanted him to take a break and try to convince him to take a break. So he explained to Dr. Weiss what would be the point. Because if I take a few days break, I will come back and my workload of the people who had come would be double as much to catch up. He said that one time he left Brooklyn. There was only a few times that the Rebbe ever left Brooklyn, Crown Heights, where the shul and his house were. There was one time when they established a camp upstate, And the Rebbe went to visit the camp, and guess what happened on the way? They got a flat tire. So they had to sit on the side of the road for 15, 20 minutes. The Rebbe said that I'm still trying to make up time for that one time that they got the flat tire. The Rebbe would totally dedicated to the people. There was only 1 hour a day that he took for personal need. And you know what that was? It was to visit his mother. His mother, he was able to bring over. His father was killed in Ukraine. He was able to bring his mother to America. And the last few years of his life, every single day, he would go and spend an hour with him. And you know that a lady once told the Rebbe, she told the story that she was complaining to the Rebbe about her problems that she was having with her mother. And the Rebbe would said to her, I would give up anything in the world just to be able to have that tea time that I had with my mother. He took it very special. Now, it was not just the Jewish people that he was concerned for. And this is where I show you that to have lived in the time when Moses was. Because he was a Rebbe, not just for the Jewish people, he was a Rebbe for the world. For non-Jews as much as Jews. 100%.
Yes, celebrities.
Many. And this is why, so I want to share with you some stories. The Rebbe once met with a US Senator, Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He had, I guess, the Rebbe's district of Brooklyn in his, what's it called? Jurisdiction. So he came to meet the Rebbe to discuss. Now, obviously, the Rebbe is the head of an organization, has many followers, also had the needs of Crown Heights that he obviously was the Rebbe and leader of, and had his community. And the senator was there to get the Rebbe's support. Okay? After the meeting, they interviewed the senator. And he said, I've never met in my life a leader or individual like this. They said, how come? He said, I've met many leaders. I've met many people of influence. I told the Rebbe about him giving us support and et cetera, and the Rebbe, and we had a long meeting. We went through different issues. And then the Rebbe turned back to the senator and said, now that you've asked me what you needed to ask me, I want to ask of you something. And in my head, I went, oh, just like all of them. It's never simple. It's always a give and a take, right? And the Rebbe looked at him and said, you know, I need you to investigate something. In your jurisdiction, there is a population, and being that their culture is to be very quiet and not make a noise and keep to themselves, they are getting unserved. What's the word? They're not getting served according to their needs. Please, when you go back, investigate it. And he was talking about the people in Chinatown. Because their culture is not to make a noise, but they are being underserved. So please, when you go back, look into it and see what you can do to help these people. He says, I've never in my life left someone like that. He says, not only does he have nothing to do with the Chinese people, the Chinese person in Chinatown don't even know that this man exists. And here the Rebbe is, and he could have asked for anything. And I'm sure there was many things that his people need. And here the Rebbe's concern when he had the opportunity was to ask for someone that wouldn't have had the opportunity to voice their concern. That's one story. Let me share with you another story. You ever heard of a lady called Shirley Chisholm? Famous lady. Shirley Chisholm. Daniel, you heard of Shirley Chisholm? Shirley Chisholm was a black lady, and in 1968, she was the first one to she represented the 12th district, which included the neighborhood of Crown Heights in Brooklyn, and she made headlines as the first African American woman to be elected to Congress in 1968. You can look it up. Her name is Shirley Chisholm. And it was a very, obviously in 1968 was a very race-related politics. And it was a big blow to some of the politicians who mainly were Southern politicians in the Congress, in the House. So what they did was that she made it to Congress. They assigned her to the Agricultural Committee, which for her was a big blow because she looked at it as a slap in the face, basically, because they looked for her for a position that kind of didn't have much influence. So that gave it to the African-American new woman, and she was very, very disappointed about it. When she got a phone call at the time of her getting elected, and she was told the Lubavitcher Rebbe wants to see you. And she came to the Rebbe, and this is the story that's told by one of her staff people. So it's a first-hand story. And the Rebbe turned to her and says, I know you're very disappointed. I know you're very upset. She said, not only am I upset, I'm insulted. What should I do now? So the Rebbe told her that everything Hashem gives, you have to be able to see the opportunity and the blessing. And the Rebbe turned to her and said, what a blessing God has given you. Divine providence has put you in this position. He says this country has much surplus food, and there's many hungry people. You can use this gift that you are now in charge of the Agriculture Committee and find a creative way to do it to feed these people. She came out of there, she went in down, and she came out inspired. She went to the Congress, and she happened to meet Senator Bob Dole on her first day, who was a politician from a farm state. And he was looking for help because for the Midwest farmers who were losing money from their crops. and because America was starting to buy their agriculture from Cuba, so they were losing money. And so he said, Dole told the senator told Chisholm, our farmers have all this extra food and we don't know what to do with it. And at that moment, the alarm bells went off in her head, what the Rebbe told her. And the next few years, they expanded and made the food stamp program. You ever heard of the food stamps? That was from this lady, Chisholm. So if there is today in America a poor American family being able to buy food, it is because, and then later she also did the WIC program, which was till today it says, Chisholm said, I was responsible for the food program. And she said at her retirement party, she fed over 8 million people. And she said at her retirement party, I owe this all because a rabbi who was an optimist taught me that what you may think is a challenge is a gift from God. And if poor babies, she said, have milk and poor children have food, it's because a rabbi in Crown Heights had vision. Now, why I say this story is that the Rebbe didn't have to call her. But you see how much responsibility the Rebbe had on his shoulders. He felt and he was a leader for the world, not just for his own.
For the queen too, yeah.
Huh?
For all the queen.
Yeah. So when I say that the Rebbe was not just a Rebbe for his Hasidim and not just a leader for the Jewish people, he was a Rebbe for the world. And he put it on his shoulders. Now, I want to share with you stories of how the Rebbe, like I said before, was the biggest gift to the world, to the Jewish world especially, post-Holocaust. And how he took that generation that was a crippled generation from what happened and restored faith. So this story is of an individual. I actually know they're friends with, and I was actually in school with his grandchildren, with some of his grandchildren. It's an individual, his name is Chaim Moss from Australia. Moss, actually his name is Sam Moss. And his son tells the story. His father was born in a little shtetl, very famous shtetl that had a Hasidic shtetl, Munkac, in Czechoslovakia. The famous Munkac Rebbe. If you want, you could lower the air conditioning.
Yeah,
The Munkac.
Can you do that?
It was today. It's Czechoslovakia. Today it's Ukraine. Munkac. And over there, he even went to the Rebbe, the famous Reb Chaim Eliezer Spira, the author of the Munchas Eliezer. You can look it up. The Munkacher Rebbe's yeshiva. In 1944, the Nazis took the Jews of Munkac, herded them together into a ghetto. From there, they were transferred to Auschwitz and then to Dachau. Obviously, they endured most unspeakable trials and tribulation. And he said that at one point his father was a young man. He got very, very sick. and he was near death. But he was saved by a person called Oscar Heller, who slipped him a little extra food. He worked in the kitchen, and he recovered. After the war, he was able to get to Australia, where he married a local Jewish girl, and he built a very, very successful business, textile business. His sons took over the business, and today are actually very, very, very wealthy people. And the son saying the story said, I was born in Sydney, and so was my brother. From that day on, the man wanted nothing to do with religion. And from the moment he was liberated, and he came from a religious, shtetl and yeshiva, but from the moment he was liberated in 1956, he never stepped foot in a synagogue again. He was angry with God, and he refused to go to a synagogue. Obviously, you cannot judge. Now, what happened was their mother passed away when she was young, at 38. And him and his brother were teenagers. And his wife passing away just made the father even more bitter. This man telling the story said, after my mother's passing, I got interested in Judaism to such a degree. He was a teenager at the time. He started to become more observant. And when he finished high school, he enrolled himself in a Chabad yeshiva in Melbourne. And when the father heard about it, he got really angry and upset. He rejected that all from everything that happened to him. And now his son, his oldest son, has a yarmulke and tzitzit, and he's sitting in yeshiva. It was way too much for him. So he decided to go. He's a businessman. He knows what to do. He decided that when next time he went to the administrators of the yeshiva and said to them, you got to kick my son out. They say, well, we don't kick people out for no reason. So he says, okay, pulled out his checkbook and he said, what's it going to cost me? So they said, we would love your money, but we're not going to kick your son out. So he says, oh, okay, fine. He's a businessman. He realizes they're not really in charge. He's going to go to the man in charge, the Rebbe, and tell the Rebbe to kick his son out and give him a contribution. So in 1975, he arranges a meeting with the Rebbe. And with the convinced that he's going to convince the Rebbe to kick his son out of yeshiva for a good check. He didn't know who he was dealing with, obviously. So, first of all, his son says he got into a meeting, and his father, by the way, he said, refused to sit, even though the Rebbe told him to sit. He refused to sit because he remembered in Munkach, being by his Rebbe, that you don't sit in front of a Rebbe out of respect. To which the Rebbe replied, if you don't sit, I'm not going to sit. So the Rebbe stood by his desk And that's how they had their meeting. But sometime point, they sat. He asked, the Rebbe spoke with him. The Rebbe asked him, he said, tell me, you come from Munkach. Tell me about the Munkacher Rebbe. Tell me about your time in yeshiva. And the man just opened up to the Rebbe about going back to his childhood. Then the Rebbe asked him about the war and about the ghetto. The man had never spoken about it before. And for the first time in his life, he broke down. And he started crying. And I haven't heard this, I could have, but I haven't heard this with anyone else. The Rebbe came around his desk and put his arm around him and hugged him. The subject of whether he kicked his son out never came up. But at the end of the evening, the Rebbe said, don't worry. Everything will be okay. The son says the father never told him what happened that night. But from that night on, he never again tried to convince him not to go to yeshiva. And he said that it was only recently in his older age when the father was telling the story, he said that night after that audience, he felt like a giant weight was lifted off his shoulders. And years later, when the son became a full-fledged Chabadnik, and I was actually in yeshiva with some of his children, which is this man's grandchildren. They went to the Rebbe. The Rebbe would once, by Rosh Hashanah, would give out honey cake. People would come and ask blessings, and the tradition by Rebbe was to give out lekach, it's called, honey cake. Interestingly enough, it's actually a Munkacher minhag, which the Rebbe adopted. And when they were standing in line, the Rebbe noticed this man's father, and he stopped the line, and he asked him to come over. And they spoke for 3 or 4 minutes, and the Rebbe asked the father how things are, and an update since the last they met. And the man never shared the details of that conversation. But he did say another conversation, being that he was a wealthy man, he was friends with Menachem Begin before Menachem Begin became prime minister. And he was one of his supporters. And once, he says he believes it was in 1975, when he was in Paris, he asked Begin, who do you think is the greatest leader of the Jewish people? And Begin said right away, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And again, this is 1975. He wasn't a religious man. He asked him, why are you saying that? And he said, Begin said this, because the Rebbe lifted the whole generation after the Holocaust. And he said he helped Jewish people believe in themselves again. And there you see a story with that resonated with him. This man was able to believe in himself again after the Holocaust. You heard of a man called Elie Wiesel? Famous author. He wrote about the Holocaust as well, famous survivor. There was many correspondence between Elie Wiesel and the Rebbe. And you know, Elie Wiesel was not refused to get married and bring children into this world.
Was not?
He refused after what he experienced in the Holocaust.
Oh.
Do you know that the Rebbe was able to convince him? And he did get married, and he had a son, a child. Again, the same man, Moss, in the early 1900s, he was going through some business problems. He had invested a lot of capital in the textile industry in Australia, which collapsed due to the Chinese coming in, competition. And he and his partner started running small retail stores. And from the textile industry, and him having all this trouble with business, the ramifications of him, not just for his own family collapse, was a significant because he employed thousands of people. So the Chabad rabbi in Sydney, Rabbi Feldman, convinced him to write to the Rebbe, which they did. They were asking the Rebbe for business advice. But you know what the Rebbe said? The Rebbe wrote back that they should check their tefillin. Him and his partner should check their tefillin. At that time, neither of them were even putting on tefillin. They got the letter back. They began to put it on, the tefillin. And about that time, the business turned around, and it took a few years, but they got all their fortunes back. You see, this is, I think, also very important. And this is the next few stories I want to bring out. Is they were asking the Rebbe for business advice, but they got something altogether different kind of advice. Is the Rebbe had spiritual vision that we don't have or necessarily have. And time again, when people would ask the Rebbe for blessings in whichever area they had in life, whether it be health, whether it be business, the Rebbe always encouraged to find a vessel, a spiritual vessel in their lives for which they should be able to receive God's blessing from above. Tell you a story I once heard. You know, the Rebbe, many people from all walks of life, after the Rebbe's stroke in 1976, and he wasn't able to see people on an individual basis, in which turned the Rebbe into, on Sundays, seeing people and people would come and they would have a very short time, and the Rebbe people would line up. I personally was able to go, and those people would line up. It could be all the way down Eastern Parkway. Jeff and Seema were there. The line could take a few hours, right? And they would just to get 30 seconds with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, each person that passed by, the Rebbe would give $1 bill, not to go and buy a piece of candy. But the idea was that the Rebbe said that when two people meet, two Jews meet, a positive outcome should come out of that meeting. And the Rebbe would give that $1 bill for them to go and give it for charity, for tzedakah. Now, most people, you got $1 bill from the Rebbe, it's a had a lot of blessings with it. So they would keep that dollar bill and exchange it for another dollar to give to charity. Okay, and those that merited to get $1 from the Rebbe was a very big merit.
Okay.
I do. Michal also has dollar bills from the Rebbe. So when I went personally, it was during the Gulf War. And my father we went to Israel right before the breakout of the Gulf War. And then he was able to come to New York. And I went with him to New York at the time. I was in first grade, I remember. So when I went, I saw my teacher from first grade in line. I was a little kid, so I was nervous about passing the year. So before I met the Rebbe, the grade. So my father told me that I should think what I want to say to the Rebbe before I come. So I actually have the video. So as a little kid, I went to the Rebbe. I can't believe how brave I was as a little kid. I said to the Rebbe, I want $1 for myself, for my family, and then I mumbled, I think, to pass, but I don't think the Rebbe heard, like, I don't even know if I came it out. I wanted a third dollar to pass my grade. And the Rebbe gave me $1. You see it in the video. The Rebbe gives me $1. This is for yourself. And the Rebbe gave me a second $1 for my family.
Did you get it?
I passed that year.
He won that.
Any case,
אני הייתי 26 שנה שם.
ready?
אני הייתי 26 שנה שם.
Wow.
היה שם איזה הרבה אנשים היה.
There was a lot of people.
אלא טוב כמו היה.
Wow. So any case, there was once an individual, a family, that they had a little child, and she stopped speaking. And they took her to all the professionals all over the world for quite some number of years. She was absolutely mute. She wouldn't speak. And they didn't know what the problem was. All the doctors that went around the world had no idea what the problem was. They were in Manhattan to see a professional. Outside the offices there, they met some Chabadniks that were doing mitzvahs. And they said to them, why don't you go see the Lubavitcher Rebbe? They weren't religious. They went in the dollar bills, and they came to the Rebbe. And I don't know how, either the father or whatever, they told the Rebbe about the girl. The Rebbe looked at the girl and said to the girl, will you take upon yourself to light Shabbat candles? She was a girl. The Rebbe encouraged girls that from the age of 3 to light Shabbat candles. So the girl looked back and nodded, yes. The Rebbe asked again, will you take upon yourself to light Shabbat candles? And again, the girl nodded and was looking at her parents, like, what does the Rebbe want from me? And the Rebbe asked a third time, will you light Shabbat candles? And the girl looked back at the Rebbe, and for I don't know if it was for the first time or for many years, she started to speak and said yes. And then she started to speak.
Mm.
So the father asked the Rebbe if you were able to do such miracles, why did you have to have the girl go through this whole thing? He says the Rebbe, and this is going back to that business advice. He says, I don't perform. The Rebbe is not, again, I'm using my own words and not necessarily is what the Rebbe said, but the Rebbe is not a miracle maker. The Rebbe is not here to make miracles. But the Rebbe is here in a way that he could see spiritually, that when you take upon yourself to a vessel to receive God's blessings, and that's what the Rebbe was doing for this young girl. when the moment she sincerely took upon herself to do something for God and do the mitzvah of Shabbat candles, the blessings were able to be flowed down. You know, there was one of the most famous students of the Rebbe, and who was able to transcribe and to work on the Rebbe's talks and teachings. His name was Rebbe Ob. He would, on Shabbat, when the Rebbe would present his teachings in a Farbrengens, there's no recording on Shabbat. So he would lead a whole team of people that would, and the Rebbe could talk for hours, sometimes from anywhere between 3-4 hours to 9 hours. And some of these talks were very deep. So they had a few individuals that would memorize the Rebbe's talks. And then after Shabbat, when they're able to write and to record, they would go over what everyone through memory what the Rebbe said. And then afterwards they would transcribe it, put it together, and then the Rebbe would present it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would edit some of it and etc. Called a chayzer, right? Now, he once said that a Rebbe is someone that can hear the cry of the Jew from one end of the world to the next. That's what a Rebbe is. The cry of a Jew. The Rebbe can hear a cry, the Jew. Which reminds me of a story. The first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, was very sick. Life-threatening sickness. And the Hasidim were very worried that he was going to pass away. His daughter, whose name was Devar Leah, got 9 Hasidim together. And she didn't even tell them before this. And in front of a minyan, she told them that I'm taken upon whatever decree from above that my father has to be sick. I'm taking it upon myself, and my father should be well. Her father got better, and she died within the year. And she left a son, who the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, brought up, who later became the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. In any case, once the Alter Rebbe's son was studying, and in his room was this baby who ended up being the third Chabad Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. And the baby was crying. But the Alter Rebbe's son was so engrossed in his learning that he didn't hear the baby. To such a point where the Alter Rebbe, who was on a floor above, who had an infinity to this child, by the way, because of the mother, came down and rocked the baby back to sleep, and later chastised his son and said, you should never be so spiritually or that engrossed that you cannot hear the cry of a child. In order to be a Rebbe, you must be able to hear the cry of a child. And why I say that is the Rebbe was able to hear a cry of a Jewish child and a Jewish person wherever they were in the world. So listen to this story. His name is Chaim Grossman. And again, his children are Chabadniks today. Chaim Grossman tells this story. He says he grew up in Caraccio. Do you know where Caraccio is? It's a Caribbean island that is part of the Netherlands.
Curacao.
Curacao. Curacao. There were no Jewish schools at the time, and he's a Jewish kid, so he had to attend a Protestant school. He said, I had a very difficult time at school. Although I was brought up in a non-observant household, I stubbornly refused to go to their religious services and the classes that were part of the school curriculum. The non-Jewish students would pick a fight with me every day, and I even felt that the teachers and the principals were on the side of on their side. When I reached 7th grade, things didn't get better. They came to a head, and life was fights were more and more and vicious, and my relation with the school principal became very hostile, that I stopped going to school. I spent my days messing around. In those days, they didn't have video games. He played golf, and then he would just, at the end of the day, return to school for his father to pick him up. One day, the principal calls the father into his office to find out why he hasn't been in school. And the father says, "What are you talking about? I drop him off every day." So after school, he brought his kid into his office and he says, "How was school?" So he said, it was good, like always. And he says, "Did you go to school today? Did you go to school last week, 2 weeks ago?" And by that time, I couldn't lie anymore, and I had to admit he didn't. My father gave me a choice. He says, either you give in and do as all the other boys do, or if you're gonna leave school and you're gonna come and work with me, and you're gonna work very hard. And I walked into the principal's office. He said, it didn't take me long to think. I put my textbooks down and I ran back to my father. The warning letters started coming to his home saying that the law is that a minor has to go to school. You can't not let your kid not go to school. And the community that they were in, relations started becoming very sour because of it. He said, my father didn't know what to do with the situation. You know, they built up their lives, their career. And now there's this, one night he has a dream. He was very down about the whole thing, what to do with his son, whether they're going to leave this. And he has a dream. And he sees himself, we're talking about the father, near the age of 3. Now, the Hasidic custom is that at the age of 3, a boy doesn't cut his hair up until the age of 3, right? And then we have a whole beautiful hair cutting ceremony. It's a Jewish custom. So he said, I remembered in my optionist, it's called, when I was 3 years old, the hair cutting ceremony, sitting on my grandmother's lap. And she was saying to him, she was Russian, Luvia, my love, whenever you are in trouble, go and speak to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. That was his dream. It was the first time he had ever heard those words, Rebbe. He was non-observant. The next morning, his father went to shul and he asked the caretaker to unlock the door for him that he should be able to go into the shul and go to the ark. And he wanted to pray to God because he was in real trouble. Okay. Take a pause now. Sitting in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, January day, 1984. There's a rabbi, his name is Rebbe Moshe Kotlarsky. He was the assistant to the Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Chadakov. And he used to go and do a lot of missions for the Rebbe and around the world. He gets a phone call from Rabbi Chadakov. He says, Reb Moshe, he says, go and wash your hands. He washed his hands. He says, I have an instruction from the Rebbe. The Rebbe wants you to go to a place called Carousel,
Kurosawa.
which, just like me, this rabbi had never heard of in his life. Carousel. Okay? The Rebbe wants you to go to this place, Carousel. The Rebbe tells a chassid to do something. You don't ask questions, he goes. Never even heard about this place. He phones up the travel agent, finds me a ticket, he goes. What's he doing there? He has no idea. Okay? They go. He gets to the airport. He hails a taxi. He doesn't even know what he's doing there. So he thinks, what's he going to do? He asks the taxi driver, take me to the nearest synagogue. Now, he till this day, he can't explain it. In Carousel, there are two synagogues. Usually, they would take him, if you asked a taxi driver to take you to the synagogue, it was the largest synagogue, which happens to be the oldest synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. And it's a big tour, like if tourists would go see, they would go to this synagogue, right? And generally, it only has services on Shabbat and festivals. And during the week, it's like a museum. It's an old, very old, it's the oldest synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. And it's very beautiful. The floor is covered with white sand, perhaps because its founders, who escaped the Inquisition, covered the steps leading in the house of prayer in Portugal with sand in order to hide the sound of their footsteps. But in any case, the taxi driver, for some reason, didn't take them to that synagogue, but to a small neighborhood synagogue. As the taxi pulled up to the door, Rabbi Kudlowski sees, he comes out, goes out the taxi, and he sees someone coming out of the synagogue in his direction. So thinking that this man must, will be his connection to the Jewish community, he's a man coming out of the synagogue. So he turns to this man and he says, excuse me, sir, we were sent here by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and we here to get to know the Jewish people. We staying by the Plaza Hotel. Can you, introduce us to the local community? The man had just come out of the shul, praying to God for help, who he had just dreamt the night before that his grandmother told him, whenever you're in help, ask the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And here, this first person he sees after is a man that says to him, we are here from the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Wow.
So my first question to Rabbi Kudlowski was, are you able to defend yourself if someone comes up and punches you? So Rabbi Kudlowski responded, you make sure that you defend yourself and do such damage that they won't come back to you. So he said, this rabbi is a cool rabbi. And he met with, that's the boy that he met. Rabbi Kudlowski organized for this boy to come and spend the summer in a Jewish camp in New York. And then after that camp, and he had a wonderful Jewish experience, Rabbi Kudlowski was able to arrange him to go to yeshiva. And that was this boy's answer to all these problems. And this, if you don't believe me, the story is a letter that the Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote And to the boy, to this family, I'll read you the letter. I was pleased to receive your regards through your esteemed mutual friends. I must ever take exceptions because the father later wrote to the Rebbe a thank you for helping his son. And he used the reference that thank you for helping a small Jew from Curacao. So listen to what the Rebbe writes back. The Rebbe wrote, I was pleased to receive your regards through our esteemed mutual friends. I must, however, take exception to you referring to yourself as a small Jew, and Rebbe puts in quotations from Curacao. There is surely no need to emphasize to you at length that every Jew, man or woman, has a godly soul, which is a part of godliness above, as explained in Tanya, beginning of chapter 2. Thus, there is no thing as a small Jew. A Jew must never underestimate his or her tremendous, and the Rebbe underlines, tremendous potential. With the approach of Yom Tov Pesach, I take this opportunity to extend my prayerful wishes for that the festival of freedom bring you true freedom, freedom from anxiety, material and spiritual, from anything that may distract you from serving God wholeheartedly with joy, and to carry over this freedom and joy into the whole year. Wishing you a kosher and happy Passover. The Rebbe said that there's no such thing as a small Jew. Any case, I want to end. I mean, we can continue. I printed out some more stories. If you want, I can continue. Huh? You want to hear more stories? You need to go. So I'm going to end with one last story because I think we need to end it with a takeaway. And that is, by the way, if people want to learn more about the Rebbe's life, there's some beautiful biographies that they came after the Rebbe's passing. One of them is called Rebbe, the Rebbe. I can give you a few of them. We have them here as well, but I can give you links for them. As well as there's a beautiful book called Toward a Meaningful Life that also sums up a lot of the Rebbe's Toward a Meaningful Life. Toward a Meaningful Life. Any case. There's a well-known Chabad Rebbe in Paris, France. He did a lot of work for the Rebbe. He was a shliach of the Rebbe in Paris. And so this story happened at a time that the Rebbe was going through a very, very painful saga. And that was that there was a library that the previous Rebbe had. And this is a library of books, of collection of holy books and manuscripts that came into the Rebbe's possession. And it's books that were inherited from generation to generation. It's a very precious, holy, and not only, it's treasures. We're talking about books from the Baal Shem Tov and many, many holy, and also collections of all different types of anything Jewish. And the Rebbe had this vast, big library. When we go, please go to our trip to next time to Crown Heights in thing, you can actually go and visit this library. In 1985, it was discovered that books were going missing from the library. And they did an investigation, and it turned out to be the previous Rebbe had 3 daughters. One of them, the couple was killed by the Nazis. And the other 2 daughters, one was married to the Rebbe, and the other was also married to the oldest one was married to a Rabbi Shalom Garari. So the previous Rebbe had 2 son-in-laws. The Rebbe became Rebbe, and the older son-in-law was in charge of the yeshivas, and they had 1 son. So this was the Rebbe's nephew. The nephew had gone into financial problems, and he was taking the books and selling them on the market. So they had to stop him. Now, his claim was it's his inheritance, right? The trial went to secular court. And the argument basically was that these books belong to the Hasidim, to the people. It's not a personal inheritance for you to take. It's also the fact that he did it in hiding is just showing that as well. But in any case, it was a very hard on the Rebbe because it was a personal story as well. They were only two sisters. They stopped talking because of this whole story. But in any case, it was very personal, but the Rebbe took it very personal, and the Rebbe also, though, argued that this is he fought for the Hasidim. In any case, it was very hard for the Rebbe. And that time, the Rebbe would visit the Ohel. Now, usually the Ohel is the previous Rebbe's resting place, which the Rebbe is buried next to today, and which I'm going to be visiting on Thursday, like I mentioned, and that's where. Now, whenever anyone would ask of the Rebbe a blessing, the Rebbe would answer back, "I will pray for you on your behalf at the Rebbe's gravesite." So many blessings come from that. So it's in New York, in Queens, by the airport. No, in Queens. So during this saga of the Rebbe went every single day to the Ohel. And it was very significant because the Ohel, like I said before, is very a holy place. For the Rebbe to go to the Ohel, it was a whole day event. First of all, the Rebbe never ate. He fasted that day. He would go to the mikveh. Then it would be a 50 to almost an hour drive from Crown Heights to the Queens, where the oil was located. The Rebbe spent many hours there on his feet the entire time. And before coming back to 770, and generally he would come back very late and then do the prayers. And the Rebbe would not eat until the prayers and that was over. So it was a big toll on the Rebbe. And the Rebbe did it every single day during that period. So and it was very difficult to see for the Hasidim to see that. And the people were concerned of the Rebbe's health, right? And the end of the story is, thank God they won the case. It was an unbelievable story and an unbelievable any case. The one person telling the story says it was a son of this rabbi in Paris. And he says, I was studying in yeshiva in London at the time, and every day we would take upon ourselves to say the entire book of Psalms, of Tehillim, and study extra Torah and to learn the Rebbe's teachings. And we were like hoping that this would bring a little bit of comfort and joy to the Rebbe at this time while the Rebbe was going through such a difficult time. And he said, my father went to New York a few days, and he was there for when he saw the trial, and he was so taken by the case, and he went to court. He said it's not just the Hasidim that are sitting in front of the judge. The Rebbe is like being dragged down into court. There was also a whole long story. They were almost going to bring the Rebbe to court and put the Rebbe in a deposition. And then later it was actually the Rebbe's wife that went into a deposition. There's actually on YouTube, you can actually see the recording. And she did an amazing job. She actually won the case for them. Any case, the thought of the Rebbe being brought down to court was so upsetting to the son to his father, who's this rabbi in Paris, that seeing the Rebbe in pain, he came up with an idea that he went that Shabbos back to Paris and he told all the people in his shul and the Hasidim and all his influence that we have to take upon ourselves to do something. And therefore he said he wants everyone to go out. We're going to make a huge march and we're going to go and help people put on tefillin. We're going to put mezuzahs on doors. It was during the winter. We're going to go do Hanukkah menorahs, and we're going to do all the activities that the Rebbe encouraged us to do. And they did a huge project. They did thousands of tefillin and mezuzahs and things. And that day, he wrote a report to the Rebbe, and he said to everyone that partakes in this project, he's going to write their names and give it to the Rebbe. And whoever takes upon themselves to do resolutions and positive acts, etc., I'm going to write it down and give it to the Rebbe. And he did. And he faxed it over to the Rebbe. The next day was Sunday. And the Rebbe, as usual, would go to the oil. And that day, the Rebbe, as he was going to the mikveh, the secretary of the Rebbe, Rabbi Klein, gave him my father's report to the Rebbe. The Rebbe read it carefully after the mikveh, and then he turned to Rabbi Klein and he said, "Today, I don't need to go to the oil." And he didn't explain why, and didn't explain the sudden change of plans. And he stayed in Crown Heights that day, and they davened afternoon prayers like regular time. And why am I saying this story? Because there's a big lesson to be learned. And that is, the Rebbe invested his life and everything for us. The world is a different place because of the Rebbe. And when we stand here right before Gimel Tammuz, the passing of the Rebbe, and reflect on his leadership and on his teaching and on his guidance, which is still very much alive today, and think thoughts of how can I reflect on that in my own life. The best gift we can give to the Rebbe is by making the Rebbe's investment in us worthwhile. In other words, doing what the Rebbe guided us and asked us to do, which is what is the work that the Rebbe encouraged, that the Rebbe tasked us all, not just his followers, but everyone. The Rebbe made the famous statement that if you know Aleph, which is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, it's now your responsibility to go and teach someone else that doesn't know Aleph. Right? The Rebbe tasked us all as his foot soldiers to go and bring kindness, light, do a mitzvah, encourage someone else to do a mitzvah, and bring what the Rebbe's dream was from the get-go, to bring Mashiach. Right? And let me tell you something. Whatever we do, you know who you're doing when we do that for the Rebbe. The truth is, you're doing yourself the biggest favor. So, please God, let us all do and follow in the Rebbe's ways. And please God, we'll finally see what the Rebbe dreamed of. In fact, the Rebbe once wrote to Menachem Begin, said, the Rebbe said, from a young age, he dreamed of Mashiach. So let us fulfill that dream of the Rebbe.
Amen.
And bring Mashiach now.
Amen.
Everybody.